A special edition of One Soccer today as we go club by club in Canadian soccer with a look back to what was in 2024. And on today's episode with Jordan Wilson and Gareth Wheeler, we will take a deep dive with Hamilton,
Go on, Jordan.
Ontario's Forge FC. An interesting season to say the least. They won the CPL Shield, though it was closer than you might have expected when they had clinched the trophy, limped into the playoffs after securing that CONCACAF Champions Cup berth, and, well, they laid a few eggs along the way to losing to Cavalry in the final. Almost a complete reversal of what happened in 2023 when they did the same to Cavalry FC. So now, Gareth Wheeler, that Forge have lost the North Star Cup to Cavalry at long last. Do you think the dynasty is officially over, or is this just a bump in the road for the Hammers led by Bobby Smyrniotis?
No. By the way, this is a case of leading the witness. Limped into the playoffs, laid a few eggs. This doesn't characterize Forge's season. Forge were the best side of the Canadian Premier League this year. That's the lead story, 50 points, and they went on to win the Canadian Premier League Shield. It was an excellent campaign by Forge. They went on to beat both CF Montreal and Toronto FC in games in the Canadian Championship. I thought this team was full value all season long. Did they run out of steam a little bit at the end, lack a little bit of ideas, lacking a reliable number 9? Yes, but that doesn't take away from this team's credentials or how good they were. You know, put Aliman Cisse in this team, a reliable number 9. Batusalo got injured at the end of the year. Like, they're missing some key players. And I still think that they have that nucleus of players that can still take this group forward. They're well coached. They have an identity under Bobby Smyrniotis. They're just a club that continues to tick over. They know how incredibly high the bar is set, and they're going to continue to lead the way of the Canadian Premier League in setting the standard to which everyone else needs to compare themselves or try to reach in the CPL. So no, this team had an outstanding year, and they should be applauded for their efforts.
Jordan Wilson, you think of the fact that 40% of the CPL best 11 outfield is Forge. In fact, the entire midfield is Forge Orange. The run they had in the Canadian Championship, going toe-to-toe with Chivas Guadalajara in February and everything else. Do you agree with Gareth Wheeler that this was a successful season for Forge?
How could I argue with the man who was mostly right? But he's right about this one by a landslide. Look, if they won that match against Calgary, people would argue this is the best season in CPL history, right? Just one game short, they're shy. So the people that come up with these questions say Forge Dynasty's done, oh, they choked, all this stuff.
Our producers.
If they won that game, we would say this team is untouchable. This is invincible. Like, we come up with all these things to talk about Forge. Forge know what they need to do moving on to 2025. That might be the next question, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But in terms of the dynasty being over, no, they are still that team because they win even when things are going against them. They lost Poku. They still had enough to go and win the Shield. No. This team, the dynasty is not over. They're still rolling. They just need to add a few pieces.
Look, just really quickly, Adam, like, they lost their goalkeeper in Tristan Henry. They bring in 2 really good goalkeepers that share duty over the course of the year. Need a right back. Malcolm Duncan stepped up, was excellent. Need a left back. Daniel Parra came in, was excellent. Like, this team
lost
just
the center back wheels
skip.
And Mandrakar James, the man tracker, your boy. But then like two center backs kind of emerged this season. Batusalo or Labi Belu. Like, we can go on and on about Forge.
Yeah, so the dynasty, whatever you want to call it, the dominance, I'd rather prefer that word than dynasty. It's going to continue, Adam. I just don't see it veering off course at this point.
And that was the overwhelming takeaway from the Forge postseason media availability, was that from Bobby Smyrniotis on down to the players that took to the podium, they all believed it was a successful season. And one of their biggest successes, certainly financially, Gareth Wheeler, was the sale of Kwasi Poku to Molenbeek in the Belgian second tier. And last time I checked the table, it's looking like he might be a Belgian first tier player very, very soon. He's fit in like a glove, a league record transfer for a player that swapped positions mid-season. I think we all know the story now, but when you reflect on it, do you imagine this will be one of your top stories from the CPL season, just the rise and rapid sale of Kwasi Poku?
No player exhibits the characteristics and what the Canadian Premier League is all about more so than Kwasi Poku. Played in 2023 final, came off at halftime, was in tears, couldn't continue. This player starts the season getting hurt in the Champions Cup at Chivas de Guadalajara, goes out through injury, comes into this team fighting for his place. Yet the opportunity comes up for him to play as a number 9, played it as a kid. I mean, it took me by complete surprise that they were going to roll with Poku up top. It looked like the most accomplished number 9 in the Canadian Premier League. And being such a young player, if you play the way that he did, a natural fit with pace, position, finish, he just looked so accomplished there at the age of 21. He was always going to get a move. It was a matter of time. It's what Forge is all about. It's what the CPL is all about. Never mind the money. This is what the project is about. The only downside for Forge is losing Poku left a gaping hole in their team, and that's probably the reason why they didn't do the double or maybe even the treble this year.
Yeah.
Losing Poku at just the right player, right move, wrong time for Forge. That's the overwhelming sentiment.
Wheels, there's an argument to be made. If he stayed a month longer, that Forge team could have maybe taken TFC to Penn.
I said the trouble.
Like,
Yeah.
could have. No, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, we just have to put it specifically. We're elated that he moved on. If he stays a month longer, we're saying different things for sure. I love the Kwasi Poku story. One, because he took his lumps in terms of finishing runner-up in the 21 Player of the Year award last season, and I know it burned him. But he took that. Also, playing 21 games last season for Forge, never at striker, left back, left mid, right mid, subbed in 5 of those 21 games. But he got to be a professional. He got to travel, he got to win, lose, report to duty, train, all those things that are making him now an impactful player, and he'll go on to have a great career. It's because of those grassroots that he got to experience under Bobby Smirniotis and Forge FC and their staff. And this is that Canadian Premier League story, and this is why this league is so crucial. Is because a 21-year-old now, Kwasi Poku, is still a very young player, has a lot to learn, but definitely has an X factor. But he feels equipped. If you ask him, he's been a pro now for 3 years. That never happened before. So this is why, for me, Forge, obviously we could talk about the season. They could have won a trouble if they maybe had an informed striker or if Kwasi stayed. We'll never know that. But this is such a feel-good story because of what the Canadian Premier League provides and what Forge provided. This will always feel good. 5 years from now, we're going to think about the season, and Kwasi Poku will probably be the forefront of our minds.
First call up to the Canadian men's national team as well. He was the U21 Canadian Player of the Year. Bobby Smirniotis finally got his Coach of the Year honor. Tristan Borges repeats as league's most valuable player, the award he won in 2019. That closes the book on 2024. I imagine that we have already teased or at least shown our hand on what we think is needed for 2025 to match that level of success. But Gareth Wheeler, is it as simple as they need a number 9?
It's not quite that simple, but that could be atop the shopping list. They did bring in Clonaritis, who just couldn't find his fitness for this team. They brought him in. He had a little bit of an injury issue, and he just couldn't, contribute this year. So he may be one of or part of the solution. They'll most certainly bring in a player at that position. I also think keeping some of their players is going to be crucial as well. Can we just discuss Kyle Becker here for a second? The 34-year-old. I mean, he can retire with an impressive resume, one of the most underrated players in Canadian football over the course of the last 2 decades. I hope he doesn't, because he is so good. He was Forge's most valuable player for me on the season. He does the little things right. He holds people accountable. They're a better team with him on the field. I just want to say, in that Canadian Premier League final, you can make the argument that Kyle Becker was the best player on the field. He was unbelievably good. Unfortunately for him and Forge, it was on the losing side of the equation. He still has it, guys. I know he dealt with some knocks and some issues this season, but he still has it. As the Canadian Premier League continues to go young, giving young players opportunity, they need to test themselves and learn from the best of the best, you need players like Kyle Becker in this league, not only to help the young players come through, but for your team to win as well. He's a winner, and I hope that Kyle Becker is back for 2025.
Yeah. No arguments. The way he plays, there'll be a spot for him until he's ready to retire, right?
No,
Like,
it's
he's so
it's
clever.
about Kyle, right? It's not about
Yeah,
it's
he's
about
earned the
Kyle.
right to
Yeah.
call his own shot.
For sure. And obviously, he's just putting that work with the club. I'm sure when he's ready to go, he's been saying he's been old for 3 years now, but like when he's ready to call quits, he'll do that. I personally just don't think it's now. It's still quality on the pitch, and he's playing the game at a high level. For sure, it's a number 9, scream from the rooftops. That's the biggest one. I'm just curious about Forge's approach. Are you going to go with a 9 that you know in the league? A top striker who's maybe free, or are you gonna go and maybe it's still a gamble to go and get someone that hasn't played in this league, what they're gonna do. And if you look at Forge, they look at all of it, right? It's not just winning the Shield or winning the last game of the season. You want to go and can champs and do well. And what evaded them was not having a striker. So you want someone or 2 people coming in that is healthy. I think a big one too is, from my calculations or what I've read, I think Hajabapor's contract's up as well. So I don't know a player like him, how he's just cemented that role in the team. I don't think anyone does it like him. I know Jensen's great in the midfield. I know Becker's great. I know Cisse
can step in and play that role.
Could, but is he a Hajabapor? I think that's a huge miss if they have to fill that role if he does leave. But if he stays, I guess I'm just talking about speculating.
Need to find their next Woobens. It's Woobens. They need a Woobens.
And if Hajabapor leaves, they will severely miss him. I'm telling you that right now.
Well, that's the fascinating part of this stage in the offseason at the time of taping, is we're starting to hear a few names trickle out who won't be returning to their clubs, and Forge is no exception. Just like all 8 teams in the CPL will have some surprises in and out, and that will ultimately make whoever is leading the respective charges of their club's jobs the most complicated. But there's no doubt, Jordan, that he would be a big miss. And since you brought him up, I'm going to go in and say, I voted for Tristan Borges for League's Player of the Year this season. I stood by it because it was an award for the regular season. But I tell you, I watched that final, I watched the playoffs, and I just thought, man, Alessandro Hajabapor is what's really making this Forge team tick. That conduit from defense to offense, how poised he is in the ball or on the ball, and just what a growth story he has been for this team. I know Gareth votes for Becker for MVP for Forge this season. I'm going to be honest. I think Hajabapor gets mine across all competitions, every single match. Jordan, for you, in the final word of the show, who was your MVP for Forge in 2024?
The right answer is the player who who was involved with in a third of Forge's goal contributions, with Tristan Borges, 8 and 6. But I understand the 23 games that he played in the regular season, he hit the ground running in the first half. And then Toby did it, Warszewski as well, had a little stall. Like, he stalled towards the end and had a little bit of injury troubles towards the end of the season. So people forgot about him. He was unplayable for the first half of the season. And for me, put up numbers. He was a winger or a 10, had 8 goals and 6 assists. No one else had that. This guy was on flames the whole season, and then towards the end, he got a little stale. But for me, the MVP, absolutely.
He's gorgeous again. He was gorgeous again this year.
He's back.
Got it back.
Boy was back. He was back.
All right, the last one that I'm going to ask, and this is based on no speculation whatsoever, so calm down, Hamilton. Gareth Wheeler, in the final minute of the program, do you think Bobby Smirniotis is back for a 7th go-around?
Spent the last couple off seasons saying, "Oh, he's gone." I'm going to go with he's back. And then we'll see.
Jordan Wilson,
switch it up. I think he might go.
Yeah?
I think he might.
Where's he going?
For sure. I can't say.
Could be some openings.
Look at your crystal ball, Jordan.
I can't say. I don't know as much as you guys in this media world, but I know not to say anything else. He might be gone. He might be gone.
Say everything. Just let it come out.
Absolute cliff-hanging bomb left by Jordan Wilson, just teetering on the edge. Well, if you want to be up to date on all the rumblings in Jordan Wilson's cerebellum, you stick it right here on One Soccer. This has been our Forge retrospective. Gareth Wheeler, Jordan Wilson, Adam Jenkins with you. If your club has not been hit yet, we'll get there. All 11 clubs in Canada will be spotlighted on One Soccer.